What's up guys, my name is Ace, and as many of you guys know, the FFAR meta has been going on for quite some time in Warzone, and it's one of the reasons that I haven't really been too interested in playing the Battle Royale version of this game. I play Plunder a decent amount to get gameplay for videos, but when it comes to Battle Royale, I'm just not really a big fan of having a really fast time to kill in general, and that's what we're currently experiencing with the FFAR meta. Now, I did make a whole video discussing time to kill and how I feel the best meta in the game was back in the day when the Kilo or the Grau were meta, because those guns killed quite a bit slower than the FFAR, and yet they were the guns that most people were using. In those days, there was almost always time to react to being shot at, and people were generally rewarded for good sustained accuracy, rather than just the person that sees the other person first is almost always going to end up with a kill because they're just going to drop them really quickly with little to no time to react. Additionally, I feel like before they integrated the Cold War weapons into Warzone, the weapon balancing was really starting to get in a good state overall in Warzone. I'm not saying there wasn't room for improvement. I do feel like some of the bottom tier guns could have been buffed up a little bit, and maybe a few tweaks could have been made to some of the upper tier guns. But overall, I really felt comfortable pre-Cold War integration using a fairly wide variety of guns in Warzone and still being successful. I didn't feel like I was really putting myself at a disadvantage. And I'd really like to see Warzone get back to that sort of a place, where people feel comfortable branching away from the meta and still being able to compete comfortably. So I thought it would be really interesting for me to create my dream weapon balancing patch as of right now at least. Essentially, I'm just going to be going through a bunch of the guns that I feel either need nerfs or buffs, and I'm even going to share exactly what I feel should be changing and why. My primary goal behind this weapon balancing that I'm going to be proposing is slowing down the general time to kill a little bit, at least for the highly versatile guns, the guns that people are going to be using in the meta, while also bringing up some of the lowest tier guns that basically nobody has any reason to use at this point. Just bringing those guns up a little bit so that there's at least some reason to use them over the current guns that are used in the game. Keep in mind, most of this list is going to be focused on Cold War weapons because, like I said, I feel like the meta was getting into a pretty decent state before the Cold War integration. But having said that, there will be a few Modern Warfare guns in here because I don't feel like they were perfect. But let's start it off with the Cold War assault rifles. Obviously, number one on my list here is the FFAR. This gun is simply too versatile with too fast of a time to kill. And I don't mind having guns that have a fast time to kill as long as they have enough downsides to keep them in check, like the AS Val, for instance. That has an incredibly fast time to kill, but it's kept in check due to its magazine capacity, its recoil, and its bullet velocity as well. So, what I'd do with the FFAR is I would simply drop the upper torso damage multiplier. Currently, we deal 33 damage to the upper torso and 30 to the rest of the body. If you were to drop that 33 upper torso multiplier, it would now take one extra shot to kill against a fully plated enemy, and therefore our 3-plate time to kill would go from 462 milliseconds down to 528 milliseconds. And 528 milliseconds is still a very solid time to kill, so this would not destroy the FFAR, it would just keep it in check more than it currently is. Now, if you were to do just that with the FFAR, it wouldn't really make much of a difference because everybody would just move over to the Groza, which also has a very fast time to kill and a lot of similar properties to the current FFAR. It's just not quite as good in its current state. So to prevent that from happening, I would just nerf the Groza's upper torso damage from 36 down to 33, which is where the FFAR is currently. And what this would do is it would reduce the Groza's time to kill from 480 milliseconds down to 560 milliseconds, which again, this is still a very fast and competitive time to kill for an assault rifle, but it wouldn't be so fast that you can't really react to it, and it would just slow the general time to kill pacing down a little bit. In addition to that, I do think a couple of the Cold War assault rifles could really use some buffs, and these are mainly the QBZ and the Krig. Both of these guns are quite accurate, but that's where their upsides end. They fire significantly slower than the FFAR, and yet they deal less damage than the FFAR, which makes no sense whatsoever. And therefore, what I would do to these is just give them the current damage profile of the FFAR. 33 damage to the upper torso, and 30 damage anywhere else in the body. This wouldn't create a time to kill issue because the rates of fire of these guns are significantly slower. And for the QBZ, we'd have a time to kill potential against 3 plates of 617 milliseconds instead of the current 705 milliseconds. And for the Krig, it would go from 736 milliseconds down to 634 milliseconds. This would make the QBZ and the Krig much more viable as accurate assault rifles that aren't necessarily super forgiving if you miss shots due to their fire rate, but they would at least have a usable time to kill that would fit within the meta. I would feel comfortable using those guns, but I don't think they would instantly become super overpowered. And honestly, I think that would be enough for the Cold War assault rifles at least. If they were all balanced like they are right now, at least looking at it on paper, I would feel comfortable using any one of those Cold War assault rifles, and I would also feel a lot more comfortable going back to some of the Modern Warfare assault rifles. I think it would open up a ton of variety. Now, moving into the SMG category for Cold War guns, honestly, I feel like most of the SMGs here are fine as they are. I think the MAC-10, the MP5, the Bullfrog, the LC-10, these are all very usable SMGs, especially if we're going to be nerfing the time to kill of the FFAR and the Groza. However, I do feel there's one SMG in particular that just really needs some love, and this is the Milano 821. As it is right now, the Milano has one of the slowest time to kill values out of any full auto gun in the entire game. To top that off, it just doesn't have any stats that make it stand out. The one cool thing about the Milano is it's one of the few guns that gets more accurate with stopping power rounds rather than less accurate. But that little upside simply isn't worth all of the other downsides, and in any situation where you don't have stopping power rounds, you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage by using the Milano 821. So, in order to bring this into a more balanced state, I think it just needs a damage boost. It has by far the slowest fire rate out of any of the SMGs, and yet it doesn't even deal the most damage. So all that would need to be done to damage, in my opinion at least, is bump up that torso damage from 34 up to 36. This would make it so instead of an 8-shot kill against 3 armor plates, it would now be a 7-shot kill, and our time to kill potential against 3 plates would go from 729 milliseconds, which is extremely slow, especially for an SMG. It would come down to 625 milliseconds, which is still a bit on the slow side for SMGs, but at least it would be a bit more viable, a bit more usable. Perhaps one other thing they could do if this isn't enough is also boost the bullet velocity, since the Milano is designed to be more of an accurate SMG that isn't very forgiving because it's got a slower fire rate. Therefore, I would say make it a bit easier to hit those shots, so boost up the bullet velocity a bit, and give it that extra advantage over the really fast-firing and forgiving SMGs that most people are going to be using. So for this, I would say just bump up the bullet velocity from 350 meters per second up to 500 meters per second. So with that, I think that would be a really good start for balancing some of the Cold War weapons, and this would bring a lot more variety in. However, I also wanted to touch on a few Modern Warfare weapons that I also feel could be tuned. The first one is the Scar H. This gun is kind of like the Milano in the sense that there's really not much reason to use it. Currently, it has the slowest time to kill potential out of any of the full auto Modern Warfare assault rifles. It's got quite a slow fire rate, so it's not very forgiving if you miss shots. And finally, its magazine capacity potential is only 30 rounds, which is half that of most of the Modern Warfare assault rifles. So like the Milano, this is yet another case of a gun that just doesn't have a place in the game. There is no upside to using a Scar in this game over any one of the other Modern Warfare assault rifles. And for this one, I have a very simple change, and that is make its maximum damage go from 35 up to 36. That's all you would have to do to this is simply change the damage by 1 point. This would go from an 8-shot kill against 3 plates down to a 7-shot kill, which would then give us a time to kill potential of 630 milliseconds compared to the previous 736 milliseconds. Now, this time to kill wouldn't be amazing by any means, but it at least would be a lot more usable, and I could actually see an argument for using a Scar at this point. Next up for Modern Warfare guns, something that I feel like they should have done a long time ago because it just doesn't make any sense with the way it's currently balanced, is I feel they should completely swap the damage profiles of the bolt-action marksman rifles with the actual sniper rifles in the sniper rifle category. Because as it is right now, the Kar98 and the SPR deal a massive amount of damage to the upper torso. Whereas when you compare that with the AX50 or the HDR, which are the actual sniper rifles, they don't deal very much damage at all to the upper torso. And to me, this just doesn't make any sense. I think it would make way more sense to swap those around, still keep the one-shot headshot potential with the Kar98 and the SPR. That's totally fine in my mind. I just don't feel like they should be dealing way more damage to the body compared to the actual sniper rifles, which are slower and clunkier to handle. I think this would create a little bit more variety in the sniper meta. We'd start to see AX50s and HDRs come back out to play a little bit, and also, just logically speaking, it would make sense. But with that, I just have one last weapon balancing thing that I wanted to mention for Modern Warfare guns to wrap this up, and this is the CR56 AMAX. I am a little bit concerned that with the nerfs to the FFAR and Groza that I proposed, the CR56 AMAX would suddenly take that top spot and it would be hard to touch. And the reason for this is it has a great time to kill potential at just 465 milliseconds, which is quite a bit faster than all of the other assault rifles, and it doesn't have too many downsides. Now, it does have slightly worse bullet velocity than the other assault rifles, so that's one thing that keeps it in check, but perhaps something more would need to be done just to make sure it doesn't become that top-tier untouchable gun. And therefore, I would say maybe add just a little bit of extra recoil on this so it's not super effective at really long ranges. Make it so it's really clearly defined as that really powerful gun that's only really powerful in close to mid-range encounters and isn't so great for longer ranges. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I really feel like if they were to make these exact changes, weapon variety and just gunfights in general would improve significantly. I'm not saying that a new meta wouldn't emerge. There will always be a new meta that emerges. But I feel like if they were to make these changes, there wouldn't be any massive discrepancy between the meta guns and the off-meta guns. And that's really where I'd like Warzone to be. Of course, these are all just my opinions. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my proposed changes? Do you guys see any inherent flaws with these changes that would be made? And also, are there any other changes on top of this that you would love to see when it comes to weapon balancing? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.